Hello everyone, my name is Garvin and I read things and jabber about them on the internet for your entertainment. Today we're going to be looking at the merfolk of the ancient and classical world that weren't worshipped as divinities. This is the 5th video in our dive into merfolk lore, so if you haven't seen the other videos, feel free to pause this one, swim back, take a look at the other videos, and rejoin us when you're ready. We'll be happy to have you. Now, the topic of merfolk lore itself was chosen by my Everwise patrons, whose ranks you can join for as little as $1 a month and get a vote in upcoming content. There's a link in the description below. There's also a coffee link if you'd rather make a one-time donation, and if you do, please feel free to leave a request. Now, most of this video is going to be looking at Greek and Roman stories. Part of that is they're the societies that wrote their stuff down. Compared to a lot of other societies in the time period, they didn't leave us as much written material. That said, I couldn't find any mermaid stories from Egypt, another very literate society of the time, and while I did find Celtic mermaid myths, those didn't fit our definition of mermaid that I outlined in the first video, because they had completely human bodies, aka no fish parts, so they didn't fit the definition of mermaid. So, with all of that said, let's start our view of the classical world way back in Sumeria and Babylon. So back in Divine Merfolk Part 1, I mentioned Oarnes, a divine fishman who came to land to teach humanity farming, construction, laws, compound interest, all those things from civilization that we love? Yeah, let's say love. Well, he was actually the leader of a group of fishermen sages, or merman sages if you prefer, called the Apkallu. In most stories, there's 7 of them, and while they're usually referred to as fish people having the body and head of a fish, but with the arms and legs of a human and the second head of a human under the fish head. So when I look at it, it's almost as if it's a guy wearing a fish body with the head coming over like a hoodie. And maybe that's just me. I just find this whole depiction a little bit wild. The Assyrians in their art, however, would depict the Apkallu as bird-headed men with wings. But most of the stories I found stuck to them having a part fish, part human nature. They would show up, teach humanity the arts of civilization, and go back to the waters at night. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, they built the walls of the city, although other stories say that Marduk banished them back to Apsu, the primordial sea beneath the underworld, which is the source of all fresh water, be it rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, or wells. That was their original homeland. This continues the theme of merfolk as mentors or protectors to humanity. After all, if they're building walls around your city to keep out, violence, that's pretty protective, right? That said, if you're one of those folks who's big on the whole meme of darn that fish for crawling out of the sea and evolving, because of that fish, I have to go to the office on Monday. Here's your group of big bads. You have fun. For the rest of us, we have these guys. Now, I don't have a pronunciation guide for this word, so this is my best shot. The Kukulu were also found on art across Mesopotamia and Assyria. According to the myths, they were born from the ancient goddess Tiamat. The story goes that Tiamat and her husband, Abzu, or Apsu, because he and the primordial sea shared a name or were the same thing, depending on how you looked at it, gave birth to the gods. And the gods were very noisy, as children tend to be, and this drove Abzu nuts. So nuts that he decided the proper thing to do was murder all of his offspring so he could get a nap. What is it with ancient gods and murdering their offspring? I mean, it's not every pantheon that I run into this, but it's enough that it seems like somebody needed to write a parenting book before this happened. It just seems like an unnecessary escalation here. Sorry. Anyways, back to the story. The gods caught wind of it, and a bunch of them decided to do unto dear old dad before he did unto them, which is understandable, I think. I mean, this is pretty clear-cut self-defense. This guy's gonna kill us for being noisy, so we killed him first. This upset Tiamat, however, and she decided to give birth to a horde of monsters like bullmen, scorpion men, and these guys to serve as her monster army against the gods. And this went pretty well until the storm god Marduk got involved, and he subdued all of them. The Kululu would serve as monstrous opponents to a number of heroes and god, like Ninurta, in other stories as well. So they kind of end up as sort of minion monsters, but the gods did give them jobs and give them a place in their own pantheon instead of just wiping them out. So it's not all bad for them, I guess. Now, the Romans, and as far as I can tell, the Greeks, referred to the beings that we would consider mermaids as tritones, or tritons. Pliny the Elder, for example, wrote of tritons sightings off the coast of modern-day Portugal, and they were described as having dolphin-like tails and being scaly all over, not just on the fish parts, but on the human-looking parts as well as having gill-like structures under their ears. They were also believed to give a dismal moaning song at the hour of their deaths, and there are reports of entire towns claiming to hear these songs and finding the bodies of dead tritons washed up on the shore the next day. Ovid would give mermaids the origin story of having been transformed by the goddess Cybele from Trojan ships burnt and sank by the Greeks. And the mermaids remember this, which is why they dislike Greeks in his story. Which is fair, I think. Now, some of you might be wondering about the sirens. The thing is that the earliest sources we have talk about them being part bird and part woman, with no aquatic nature or fish parts, although I should mention that Homer never provides a physical description of the sirens in the Odyssey. Fish parts would kind of creep in, though, at times giving us creatures with a human upper body, bird legs, and a fish tail. Try figuring that out. Until by the Middle Ages, the mermaids had basically subsumed the sirens entirely. There's more that could be said there, but I'd rather wait until I could talk about them along with all the other bird-human hybrids in mythology. So I'm just going to kind of leave the sirens there for now. Now, that said, I do have a new level of weird for everyone today. Folks, I'd like you to meet the Ichthyornis, with the tail of a fish, the front legs of a horse, and the upper body of a man. Sometimes shown with lobster claws coming out of their foreheads, or even wings, because why not at this point? In Roman murals, they're often shown as being ridden by the Nereids and the Oceanids, who are always shown as fully human, and they are led by the demigods Bythus and Apris, who are also depicted in art as carrying the goddess Aphrodite to shore. A fun little note here is that Bythus and Apris are the brothers of the famous centaur Chiron. I tried to find out why he's fully terrestrial and they're at least semi-aquatic, but nothing was really explicitly said. Now, that said, the origin story I found did offer some clues. Buckle up, this gets wild. See, it turns out that their parents are the titans Kronos and Phileros, who was a daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. You might remember those two from the second Divine Merfolk video. See, folks, all these videos tie together, I promise. So, Kronos is married, but not to Phileros. His wife, Rhea, according to the story, cottoned on that this might be going on, and she decided she was going to catch him in the act. So when she shows up mid-deed, Kronos, thinking quickly to avoid discovery, turns into a stallion and, finishes before galloping off into the sunset. What a guy. What is with these ancient Greek deities? I feel like I'm always finding something new every time I dig in that just makes me go, why? Moving on. So, my guess here is that Chiron just kind of took after dear old dad, and the other two took more after Grandpa, because Oceanus is shown as having a fishtail. That's my best guess. Honestly, I feel like nothing but pain awaits me if I try to suss this out more, so I'm gonna tap out here, guys, and just walk away. If anyone else wants to do more digging, please feel free to share with me their findings. Just let me get a drink first. Moving on, swiftly, like a galloping stallion. I'm not sorry. Let's go ahead and look at a story that continues the theme of transformation, shall we? So, there's a mermaid myth connected to Alexander the Great, and this is connected to the stories around Alexander the Great's life, referred to as the Alexander Romance, which is a very fictionalized retelling of his life and conquest, including a quest for the water of immortality. There's a lot of different versions, but all of them involve his half-sister, Thessaloniki. In one version, he finds the water, he puts it away, instead of drinking it immediately like you should when you find the water of immortality, Alex. But no, he sticks it away for later, because why hurry getting immortality? Well, she finds it, not knows what it is, and throws it out, and he curses her and turns her into a mermaid through his magic king powers. In another version, she drinks the water instead of him and is cursed. In another, she is seduced into drinking the water by a treacherous companion of Alexander's and is then cursed. And in yet another, she drinks it by accident, and when she finds out what she did, she throws herself into the sea and is transformed and achieves immortality that way. Much like GLaDOS from the Divine Merfolk Part 2 had to live like a mermaid but achieved immortality. So, according to the story, she will approach ships and ask them how her dear brother Alexander is doing. If the sailors tell her that he lives and still reigns, she celebrates and they can go sailing off on their way. If they tell her he's dead, she flips out and in a grief-driven rage, summons a storm, sinks the ships, and kills everyone. This is how we know she's related to Alexander, because holy overreaction, the drama is real here. I do want to include a note here that Thessaloniki was a real person who was Alexander's half-sister. Upon Alexander's death, she flees back to Macedonia, but ends up getting taken captive by one of the successor generals named Cassander. In order to give his line some legitimacy, because he was taking over Macedonia at the time, he marries her, and it doesn't really look like she was consenting to that union. So this is pretty bad. She ends up bearing him 3 sons. After Cassander's death, her eldest takes over, but is quickly killed, and then the second son turns around and kills her for suggesting he share the throne with his baby brother. Maybe he should have spent more time in kindergarten. So, the real-life Thessaloniki comes off as a rather tragic figure to me, honestly. I just thought I'd include some history in the video. For our last story, I did find one that was possibly Carthaginian in origin, or at least includes Carthaginian characters. Now, this story only has one source for it, so take it with a grain of salt. That said, I thought it was a good representation of the theme of romance in mermaid mythology, so I'm running with it. This is the story of Serena Mu, the Mermaid of Mahon. Mahon is a port city on the Balearic Islands, part of modern-day Spain. The myth goes that the city was founded by the son of the Carthaginian general Mago Barca. Now, Mago Barca is a brother of Hannibal, so this guy was Hannibal's nephew. And the reason he founded a city on this site is that's the first place he touched land after being saved from a shipwreck by a mermaid. And being a grateful person, he struck up a relationship with this mermaid that turned into a romance when they both fell in love for each other. However, just when the relationship was starting to get serious, his uncle Hannibal called him to war. Being an honorable man, he would not refuse the call of his family, so off to war he went, where he died. Pretty much like all of Hannibal's family, to be honest. The mermaid had promised to wait for him, however, so she sat herself down on a rock and stayed there awaiting his return until she faded away. There is now a bronze sculpture there in honor of the legend. On that somewhat somber note, we're going to end the video. All that said, I hope you found this video informative or at least entertaining. If so, please leave a like or a comment or consider subscribing. All of these help me in my eternal struggle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. Special thanks goes to Big Steve, my biggest supporter. As usual, I will leave a list of my sources below for your pleasure, folks. I encourage you to give those sources a look. Next week, we're going to head south and look at the mermaids of sub-Saharan Africa. I hope you join me. But until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.